Chapter 3. Drekthar had not seen the cities of the Draenei when they were at peace. He only saw them when, well, I am getting ahead of myself. But he told me that my father had walked the shining roads of the Draenei, had eaten their food, slept in their buildings, spoken with them fairly, had caught a glimpse of a world so unlike our own that even today it is hard to wrap one's mind around it. Even the lands of the Kaldorei are not so alien to me as what I have learned of the Draenei. Drekthar said that Durotan did not have the words to describe what he saw. Perhaps today, living in this land that bears his name, and seeing what I have seen, he would. Regret is a bitter taste. Durotan couldn't move. It was as if the mysterious net of shining energy had flung itself about him as it had the ogre, and he was as helpless to resist. He stared, his mouth slightly open, trying to make sense of what his eyes showed him. The Draenei city was glorious, woven into the side of the mountain as if it had sprung from it. To Durotan's eyes, it was a union of stone and metal, of nature and artifice. He did not know exactly what he was seeing, but he knew it to be harmonious. With its concealing spell dissolved, the city was revealed in its tranquil magnificence. Everything he saw drew the eye upward. Massive stone steps, wide and blunt at the base and tapering toward the top, led to spherical dwellings. One reminded Durotan of a snail shell, another of a mushroom. The combination was striking. Bathed in the hues of the setting sun, the bold lines of the steps were softened, and the dome seemed even more invitingly rounded. He turned to see a similar expression of awe on Orgrim's face, and then saw the slight smile curving Restallon's blue lips. "You are welcome here, Durotan and Orgrim," Restallon said. The words seemed to break the spell, and Durotan moved forward awkwardly. The stone of the roads had been smoothed, by time or Draenei hands, he could not say. As they drew closer, Durotan could see the city continued up the mountain. The architectural pattern of a wide, bold steps leading to a softly curved structure was repeated here. There were long roads, made of the same white stone that somehow did not seem to get dirty, although at least 10 generations of orcs had lived and died since the Draenei had arrived. Instead of the skins and horns of animals slain in the hunt, the Draenei seemingly utilized the gifts of the earth. Gleaming gems were everywhere, and there was that curious overabundance of light brown metal unlike Durotan had ever seen. The orcs knew metal. They worked it to serve them. Durotan himself had helped in the hunt with axe and sword. But this... "What is your city made of?" Orgrim asked. It was the first thing he had said since the two began their odd journey in the company of the Draenei. "Many things," Restallon said amiably. They were passing through the gates now, and receiving curious, but not hostile looks from the denizens of this place. "We are travelers, fairly new to your world." "New," Durotan said. "It was over 200 summers ago that your people came here. We were not as we are now." "No, you are not," Restallon agreed smoothly. "We have watched the orcs grow in strength, and skill, and talent. You have impressed us." Durotan knew it was meant as a compliment, but somehow the comment stung, as if the Draenei thought they were somehow better than the orcs. The thought came and went, fleeting as a brush from a butterfly's wing. He kept looking around, and to his shame, wondered if that was not indeed the case. No orc dwelling was this ornate, this complicated. But then, the orcs were not Draenei. They did not need or choose to live like the Draenei. To answer your question, Orgrim, when we arrived here, we utilized everything we had brought with us. I know your people build boats to travel the rivers and lakes. Well, we came on a boat that could travel in the sky, a boat that brought us here. It was made of metal and other things. Once we realized that this was to be our new home, we took part of the boat and used it in our own architecture. So that was the giant, muted, swirling metal that seemed at once to be made of copper and skin. Durotan's breath caught. Beside him, Orgrim scowled. "You lie. Metal cannot float." An orc would have growled and boxed Orgrim's ears, hard, for such insolence. The Draenei merely chuckled. "So one would think. But one would think that it would not be possible to summon the elements to fight an ogre if one did not know better." "That is different," sniffed Orgrim. "That is magic." "So is this, of a sort," Restallon said. He beckoned to one of his men and said something in his native tongue. The other Draenei nodded and hurried ahead. "There is someone I would like you to meet," If he is not too busy, Restlawn said, then fell silent. Durotan had 1,000 questions, but did not dare voice them, fearing that he would only make himself look foolish. Ogrim seemed to have accepted Restlawn's comment about magic, but both youths still craned their necks looking around. They passed many Draenei in the street, and one saw a female who looked about their age. She was delicately built, but tall, and when Durotan met her gaze, she seemed startled. Then a soft smile curved her lips, and she ducked her head shyly. Durotan felt himself smiling in return. Without thinking, he said, "In our encampment you would find many children. Where are the Draenei children?" "We do not have many," Restlawn said. "Our people are very long-lived, and because of that we do not often have children." "How long-lived?" asked Ogrim. "Very," was all Restlawn would say. "Suffice it to say that I remember our arrival here." Ogrim stared openly at their companion. Durotan wanted to elbow him, but he was too far away. He suddenly realized that the young-seeming female they had just seen was probably nowhere near his age after all. At that moment, the scout that Restlawn had dispatched returned and spoke quickly. Restlawn looked pleased at whatever the scout had to say, then turned, smiling, to the two orcs. "The one who brought us to this world, our prophet, Velen, is staying here for several days. I thought he might wish to see you. It is not often we get such visitors." Restlawn's smile widened. "I am very pleased to say that not only has Velen agreed to meet you, he has invited you to stay with him this evening. You are to dine with him and sleep in the Magister's house. This is a very high honor indeed." Both boys were struck dumb. Dinner with the prophet, the leader of all the Draenei. Durotan was beginning to think it might have been better if he had been squashed flat by the ogre's club. They followed dutifully, as Restlawn led them down the winding climbing streets, up through the foothills, and to the large building that sat highest on the mountain. The steps, perfectly square and solid, seemed to go on forever, and Durotan's breath came quickly as they climbed. He reached the top and was regarding the snail-shell structure with interest when Restlawn said, "Look back." Durotan and Ogrim obeyed, and Durotan's breath was caught in his throat. Below them, spread out like jewels on a meadow, was the Draenei city. The last bit of sunset painted them in flaming colors. Then the sun settled over the horizon, and all was bathed in shades of purple and gray. Lights came on in the houses, and Durotan thought of the stars in the sky settling on the earth. "I do not mean to brag, but I am proud of my people and our city," Restlawn said. "We have worked hard here. We love Draenor, and I never thought to have the chance to share it with an orc. The ways of destiny are strange indeed." As he said this, a deep, almost ancient sorrow seemed to settle on his strong blue features. He shook off the mood and smiled. "Come in, and you will be attended to." Silent, shocked almost beyond the ability to speak, their young minds wide open to all the sights and sounds and smells of this thoroughly alien place, Durotan and Ogrim entered the Magister's home. They were shown into rooms that, while ornate and beautiful, made them feel oddly penned in. The curving walls, so attractive from the outside and no less lovely here, seemed to confine rather than embrace them. Fruit sat in bowls ready for consumption. Strange clothes were set out for them to wear, and a tub of water so hot that its steam sat in the middle of the room. "That water is too hot to drink, and is too much for steeping leaves," Durotan said. "It is for bathing," the Draenei replied. "Bathing?" "To wash the dirt from one's body," Restlawn said. Ogrim shot him a look, but Restlawn seemed to be quite serious. "We do not bathe," Ogrim growled. "We swim in the rivers in summer," Durotan said. "Perhaps this is similar." "You do not need to do anything you feel uncomfortable with," said Restlawn. "The bath, the food, the clothes are here for your pleasure. Prophet Velen will expect to see you in an hour. I will come for you then. Is there anything you need?" They shook their heads. Restlawn nodded and closed the door. Durotan turned to Ogrim. "Do you think we are in danger?" Ogrim eyed the strange materials in the hot water. "No," he said, "but I feel like I am in a cave. I would rather be in a tent." "Me too." Durotan went to the wall and tentatively touched the curving surface. It felt cool and smooth beneath his fingers. He realized that he had expected it to feel warm and somehow alive. Durotan turned and pointed at the water. "Do you want to try it?" "No," Ogrim said. Both orcs started laughing, and both eventually splashed their faces and found the warm water to be more pleasant than anticipated. They ate the fruit, drank the water, and decided that the cloth vests laid out for their use were acceptable to wear in place of their soiled, sweat-stiff tunics, but that they would keep their leather breeches. The time passed more swiftly than they had anticipated, and they were engaged in a challenge to bend one of the metal legs of a chair when there came a soft knock on the door. They jumped guiltily. Orgrim had managed to twist the chair leg somewhat, and it stood a bit crookedly now. "The prophet is ready to see you now," said Restallon. "He is an elder," was the first thing Durotan thought as his eyes met those of Prophet Velen. Seeing the other Draenei up close had been startling enough. To behold Velen was something else again. The Draenei prophet was half a head taller than the tallest of the city guards Durotan had seen, but not as powerful seeming physically. His body, clad in soft, swirling, light tan robes, seemed less muscular than theirs, and his skin, it was a warm alabaster hue. His eyes, deep set and wise, glowed a brilliant blue, and were encircled by deeply etched wrinkles, speaking of one who was not just an elder, but possibly even ancient. His silver hair did not flow down his back, as was the case with the others, but was ornately braided and looped, exposing his pale skull. His beard flowed like a silver wave almost to his waist. Not elder, not even ancient, Durotan thought, as the intense blue glowing eyes settled upon him and seemed to bore into his very soul. Almost outside of time altogether. He thought about Restallon's comment that he himself was over 200 summers. Velen was a good deal older than that. "Welcome," Velen said in a mellow voice as he rose and inclined his head. The braids danced with the movement. "I am Velen. I am glad that my people found you today, though I doubt not that in a few years you would be more than capable of handling an ogre, and even a grom or two by yourselves." Again, Durotan did not know how he knew this, but this was no idle compliment. Orgrim sensed it too, for he stood up even straighter and met the Draenei's eyes evenly. Velen waved them to sit, and they did so. Durotan felt awkward and ungainly, sitting at the lavish table in the ornately carved chairs. When the food came out, he relaxed inwardly. Haunch of talbuk, roasted white feathers, large rounds of bread, and plates heaped high with vegetables. This was food he knew and understood. Somehow, he had expected something entirely different, but why? Their buildings and way of life might be vastly different from that of the orcs, but like the orcs, the Draenei lived off what the land could provide. The preparation was slightly unusual. The orcs tended to either boil their food or cook it over an open flame, when they cooked it at all. Frequently, flesh was eaten raw, but overall, food was food, and this food was delicious. Velen was an excellent host. He asked questions and seemed genuinely interested in the responses. How old would the boys be before they could hunt ogres? Choose a mate. What was their favorite thing to eat? Their favorite weapon? Orgrim, even more than Durotan, warmed to the conversation and began talking of his prowess. To his credit, he did not need to embellish his stories. "When my father passes, I will inherit the Doomhammer," Orgrim said proudly. "It is an old and honorable weapon passed down from father to eldest child." "You will swing it well, Orgrim," said Velen, "but I trust that it will be many years before you take on the name of Doomhammer." The fact that his father would have to die before he would become Orgrim Doomhammer seemed to have momentarily escaped the young orc, and he abruptly grew solemn. Velen smiled with, Durotan thought, a hint of sorrow. At the moment, fine cracks appeared in Velen's face, the subtlest of spiderwebs on that smooth white surface. "But describe this hammer to me. It must be a mighty weapon." Orgrim brightened again. "It is enormous. The stone is black and blunt and powerful, and the shaft is made of carefully crafted wood. Over the years, the shaft has had to be replaced, but the stone itself has not a chip on it. It is called the Doomhammer, because when its owner takes it into battle, it spells doom for the enemy." "I see," said Velen, still smiling. Orgrim was warming to his task. "But there is also another prophecy," he continued. "It is said that the last of the Doomhammer line will use it to bring first salvation and then doom to the orc people. Then it will pass into the hands of the one who is not of the Blackrock clan. All will change again, and it will once again be used in the cause of justice." "That is a powerful prophecy," said Velen. He said no more, but Durotan felt a shiver. This man was dubbed prophet by his people. Did he know if the Doomhammer prophecy would come true? Did Durotan dare to ask? Orgrim continued, describing the Doomhammer in loving detail. Durotan, who had seen the weapon in question, ceased listening to Orgrim's chatter and focused on Velen. Why was this being so interested in them? Durotan was a sensitive youth, he knew. He had overheard some snippets of conversation from his parents, who were worried about such sensitivity, and from Mother Kashur, who scoffed at them and told them not to worry about important things and to leave the boy to his fate. Durotan knew feigned interest when he saw it, and felt that he recognized it even in a Draenei. But Velen's brilliant blue eyes were bright and focused, his kind if ugly face open, his questions sincere. He wanted to hear about the orcs, and the more he heard, the sadder he seemed to become. I wish Mother Kashur could be here instead of me, Durotan thought suddenly. She would appreciate this opportunity more than Orgrim or I could. When Orgrim had finished describing the Doomhammer, Durotan asked, "Can you tell us of your people, Prophet? We know so little. In the last few hours I have learned more than any of my people have, over the last 100 years, I think." Velen turned glowing blue eyes to Durotan. Durotan wanted to quail from that gaze, not because he was afraid of it, but because he had never before felt so seen. The Draenei have never withheld information, young Durotan, but I believe you may be the first one who has ever asked. What do you wish to know? Everything, Durotan wanted to say, but instead focused his question. The orcs had never met the Draenei until 200 summers past. Restalon said you came here in a great vessel that could travel the skies. Tell me more of this. Velen took a sip of the beverage that tasted like summer to Durotan and smiled. To begin with, Draenei is not our true name. It is a term that means exiled ones. Durotan gaped. We disagreed with others in our world. We chose not to sell our people into slavery, and for that we were exiled. We have spent much time finding a suitable place to dwell, a place to call our own. We fell in love with this land, and we call it Draenor. Durotan nodded. He had heard the term before. He liked how it sat on his tongue when he spoke it, and the orcs did not have a name for this place other than world. It is our term. We have not the arrogance to think that the orcs would use it as well, but such we have dubbed it, and we love Draenor deeply. It is a beautiful world, and we have seen many. Orgrim gasped. You have seen other worlds? Indeed we have, and we have met many people. People like the orcs? Velen smiled gently. There is no one like the orcs, he said, respect resonant in his voice. You are unique in our travels. Durotan and Orgrim looked at each other and sat up a little straighter in their chairs. But yes, we had been traveling for some time before we found this land. Here we are, and here we will stay. Durotan burned to ask more, to ask how long they had been traveling, what their homeland had been like, why they had left it. But there was something in Velen's timeless face that told him that, although he had been invited to inquire, the Draenei leader would not tell him that particular tale. So instead he asked about how they had tamed the nature of their weapons and magic. Our magic comes from the earth, said Durotan, from the shaman and the ancestors. Our magic comes from a different source, Velen said. I do not think you will understand it if I explain it. Orgrim said indignantly, We are not stupid. Forgive me, I did not mean to imply that, Velen said at once. It was a graceful and sincere apology, and again Durotan was impressed. Your people are wise, and you two are obviously bright, but I am not sure I have the words in your language. I have no doubt that if I had the time and vocabulary, you would understand. Even in the explanation, he seemed to grope for the words. Durotan thought of the sort of magic that could disguise a city, thought of the soft, uncanny metal somehow melded with gems of the earth and solid stone, and realized that Velen was right. There did not breathe an orc who could have grasped all of this in a single evening, though he suspected Mother Kashur would have an intrinsic comprehension, and he again wondered why it was the two races did not interact more. The conversation turned to more mundane topics. The two youths learned that deep in the Terrakar forest was a spot sacred to the Draenei called Auchendome. Here, the dead were laid to rest, placed in the ground instead of being burned on pyres. Privately, Durotan thought this odd, but held his tongue. Telmore was the closest town to this city of the dead, and Velen had come on a sad mission to lay to rest some who had died fighting the same ogre that had almost claimed Ogrim and Durotan earlier that day. Normally, Velen explained, he lived in a beautiful place called the Temple of Kerabor. There were other Draenei towns, but the largest was to the north, a place called Shattrath. At last, the meal was over. Velen sighed, and his eyes rested on his empty plate, but Durotan felt certain the prophet did not see it. "You will excuse me," Velen said, rising. "It has been a long day, and I must meditate before I sleep. It has been an honor to meet you, Durotan of the Frostwolf clan, and Ogrim of the Blackrock clan. I trust you will sleep well and deeply, safe within these walls, where none of your people have been before." Durotan and Ogrim rose with the others and bowed. Velen smiled with, Durotan thought, a hint of that strange sorrow he had glimpsed in the Draenei leader earlier. "We will meet again, young ones. Good night." The two orcs left shortly afterward. They were escorted to their rooms and indeed slept well, though Durotan had a dream of an old orc sitting quietly by his side and wondered what it meant. "Bring him," the old orc said to Mother Kashur. Mother Kashur, the eldest shaman of the Frostwolf clan, slept deeply. Because of her high position of honor, her tent was second in lavishness only to that of Garad, the clan leader. Thick rugs of cleft-hoof fur kept her old bones from the cold earth, and a loyal and loving granddaughter tended to her needs, cooking and cleaning and keeping the fire stoked on cold days for the clan's mother. Mother Kashur's duty was to listen to the wind and water and fire and grass, and drink the bitter herbal beverage each night that opened her mind to visits from the ancestors. She gathered information for her clan the way the others gathered fruits and firewood, and this gift nourished them as deeply. The old orc was not present, and yet she knew he was real. He was in her dream, and that was enough for her. In this dream state, she was young and vibrant, could see her ruddy skin glowing with health, knew her form to be sleek and knotted with muscle. The old orc was at the age which he had died, the age at which his wisdom had been at its height. His name had been Talcraw in life, but now, although he was many generations distant from her, she called him only grandfather. "You received the message," grandfather told the young, vibrant dream Kashur. She nodded, her dark hair flowing with the movement. "He and the Blackrock boy are with the Draenei," she said. "They will be safe. I can feel it." Grandfather Talcraw nodded, his thick jowls shaking with the movement. His tusks were yellowed with age, and one had been broken off in a battle long since forgotten. "Yes, they are safe. Bring him." It was the second time he had said this, and Kashur was not certain as to what he meant. "He will come to the mountain in a few months, when the trees shed their leaves asleep," she said. "So yes, I will bring him." Talcraw shook his head fiercely. His brown eyes narrowed in annoyance. Kashur smothered a smile. Of all the spirits that honored her with their presence, Grandfather Talcraw was one of the least patient. "No, no," Talcraw growled. "Bring him to us. Bring him to the caverns of Ashugan. I would look upon him there." Kashur inhaled swiftly. "You wish me to take him to meet the ancestors? Is that not what I just said? Foolish girl. What has happened to the shaman these days?" It was a rant he went on frequently, and it troubled Kashur not in the slightest. She was too stunned by the import of what he had just said. Sometimes the ancestors had wanted to see a child before. It was infrequent, but it had occurred. Usually it meant that the child in question was destined for the shamanic path. She had not thought Durotan's feet would walk that road. It was rare that a shaman led a clan. There would be too much pulling him in each direction for him to be an effective leader, to both listen to and honor the spirits and to guide one's people well, or more than most orcs could manage. One who could do both would be a remarkable orc indeed. When Kashur did not reply, Grandfather growled and slammed his staff on the ground. Kashur jumped slightly. "I will bring him on his initiation day," Kashur assured her ancestor. "At last you understand," Talcraw said, shaking his staff at her. "And if you fail me, I will take my staff to your head instead of the innocent earth." He could not completely hide a smile as he said it, and Kashur smiled back as her dream self closed her eyes. For all his bluster and short temper, Talcraw was wise and kind, and loved her deeply. She wished she had known him when he was alive, but he had died almost 100 years ago. Kashur's eyelids fluttered open, and she sighed as her spirit returned to her current, real body. As old as Talcraw had been when he died, hands and feet curled up with joint pain, body weak, hair stark white. She knew in her heart that her time would soon come, when she would be able to leave this body, this shell, for the final time and be with the ancestors in the sacred mountain. Drekthar, her apprentice, would then be the advisor to Garad and the rest of the Frostwolf clan. She had every confidence in him, and actually looked forward to the day when she would be pure spiritual energy. Although, she mused as the sunlight trickled in and the birdsong caressed her ears. She would miss the things that being alive granted her, the simple things like birdsong and hot food and the loving touch of her granddaughter. Bring him, grandfather had said, and so she would. Chapter 4. Last night, with the full moon overhead and the stars gleaming as if in approval, a young male was initiated into adulthood. It was the first time I have had the chance to be a part of this ritual, the Om Regor. In my earlier years, I was cut off from the rites and traditions of my people, and truth be told, all orcs had been cut off from such rites for too long. And once I had set my feet on my destiny's path, I had become embroiled in battle. War consumed me. Ironically, the need to protect my people from the Burning Legion and to give them a place where our traditions could again flourish took me far away from these things. But now, Durotan and Orgrimmar are established. Now there is a peace, tenuous though it might be. Now there are shamans reclaiming the ancient ways, young males and females coming of age who, if the spirits will, may never know the ashy taste of war. Last night, I participated in a timeless ritual that had been denied an entire generation. Last night, my heart was filled with joy and the sense of connection for which I had always longed. Durotan's heart hammered in his chest as he stared at the Talbuk. It was a mighty beast, worthy prey. Its horns were not mere decoration, but sharp and dangerous. Durotan had seen at least one warrior gored to death, impaled upon the 12 prongs as surely as if upon a spear. And he was to take it down with only a single weapon and no armor. There had been whispers, of course. Any matured Talbuk would do to satisfy the needs of the ritual, he had heard someone murmur in his ear as he sat blindfolded in the waiting tent. They are all fierce fighters, but at this season the males have shed their horns. Other whispers. You may only carry one weapon, Durotan, son of Garad, but you could hide armor in the wilderness where no one would know. And, most shameful of all, the shaman will determine if you are successful by tasting the blood upon your face. The blood from a long-dead Talbuk tastes exactly like that of one freshly slain. He ignored all the temptations. Perhaps there had been other orcs who had succumbed to them, but he would not be among them. Durotan would seek out a female who was quite well equipped with horns at this time of the year. He would take the one weapon he was permitted, and it would be the blood of a beast he killed, steaming in the cold air that would anoint his cheeks. And now, standing in the early, unexpected fall of snow, his axe growing ever heavier in his hand, Durotan shivered, but he never faltered. He had been tracking the Talbuk herd for 2 days now, surviving only on what he could gather, creating meager fires in the twilight that bathed the snow in a rich lavender hue, and sleeping in what shelter he stumbled upon. Orgrim had already completed his rite of passage. Durotan envied the fact that his friend had been born in summer. He had thought it would still not be too difficult in early autumn, but winter had decided to come ahead of time, and the weather was bitter. It seemed as if the Talbuk herd, too, was taunting him. He could come upon their tracks and droppings easily enough, see where they had scraped the snow for dried grass or pulled bark from the trees, but they always seemed to elude him. It was late afternoon on the third day when it appeared as though the ancestors had decided to reward his determination. Twilight was coming, and Durotan had thought with a sinking heart that he would have to again seek shelter to mark the end of a fruitless day. Then he realized that the small pellets of dung were not frozen hard, but fresh. They were close. He began to run, the snow squeaking beneath his fur boots, a new warmth filling him. He followed the tracks as he had been taught, cleared a rise, and beheld a herd of the glorious creatures. Immediately, he crouched behind a large boulder and peered around to gaze at the beasts. They were still dark brown against the white snow, their winter coats not yet upon them. There were at least 24, maybe more, mostly females. It was good that he had found the herd, but now he had another problem. How would he take down just one? Talbuk, unlike many prey animals, would protect others in their herd. If he attacked one, the rest would come to defend it. Shaman accompanied the hunters in order to distract the animals. Durotan was alone, and suddenly he felt very vulnerable. He frowned and rallied himself. He had been searching for these creatures for almost 3 days, and now here they were. Nightfall would see a fresh haunch of meat devoured by a hungry orc youth, or would see a stiffening orc corpse in the snow. He watched them for a while, aware that the shadows were lengthening, but not wanting to hurry and make a fatal mistake. The Talbuk were diurnal creatures, and they were busy digging hollows in the snow in which to curl up. He knew they did such a thing, but now he watched in dismay as they settled in tightly against one another. How would he separate one? Movement caught his eye. One of the females, young and healthy from a gentle summer, spent feasting on sweet grass and berries, seemed to be in a feisty mood. She stamped and tossed her head, crowned with a glorious set of horns, and almost danced around the others. She did not seem inclined to join them, but like 1 or 2 others, opted to sleep on the outside of the cluster of furry bodies. Durotan began to grin. What an offering from the spirits. It was a good omen. The liveliest, healthiest one in the herd, the one who did not need to follow mindlessly, but choose her own path. While that choice would likely be her death, it would also give Durotan a chance to win his honor and right to be treated as an adult. The spirits understood the balance of such things. At least, he was told they did. Durotan waited. Twilight came and went, and the sun sank below the mountains. With the sun went even the feeble warmth it had hitherto provided. Durotan waited with the patience of the predator. Finally, even the edgiest of the herd tucked up its long legs and bedded down with its fellows. At last, Durotan moved. His limbs were stiff, and he almost stumbled. He crept slowly from his hiding place behind the boulder and went down the slope, his eyes on the drowsing female. Her head drooped on its long neck, and her breathing was regular. He could see small white puffs appearing in front of her muzzle. Slowly, pacing his feet as carefully as he could, he moved toward his quarry. He did not feel the cold. The heat of anticipation, the powerful focus, drove any sensations of discomfort away. Closer he came, and still the Talbuk dreamed. He lifted his axe and swung it down. Her eyes opened. She tried to scramble to her feet, but the death blow had already come. Durotan wanted to scream the battle cry he had heard his father utter so many times, but he bit it back. It would not do to slay the Talbuk only to be slain himself by a dozen of her herd in retaliation. He had sharpened the blade to shocking keenness, and it sliced through the thick neck and vertebrae as if slicing through cheese. Blood spurted, the warm, sticky fluid spattering Durotan gently, and he smiled fiercely. Anointing himself with the blood of his first solo kill was part of the ritual. The Talbuk had done it for him. Another good omen. Silent though he tried to be, he heard the sounds of the awakening herd. He whirled, breathing heavily, and let loose with the blood-chilling battle cry his throat had been aching to utter. He held his axe, the gleam of its metal blade now obscured with crimson blood, and bellowed again. The Talbuk hesitated. He had been told that if it was a clean kill, they would flee rather than attack, intuiting on some primal level that they could no longer help their fallen sister. He hoped this was true. He might be able to take down 1 or 2, but would fall beneath the padded feet if they chose to attack. Moving as one, they began to back away, and then finally whirled and turned to run. He watched them gallop over the rise to disappear, their paw prints in the pristine snow the only evidence that they had been there. Durotan lowered his axe, panting with exertion. He raised it again and let out a cry of triumph. His empty belly would be full tonight. The spirit of the Talbuk would enter his dreams, and on the morrow he would return to his people, an adult male, ready to take his place in serving the clan, ready to one day become its leader. "Why do we not ride?" Durotan asked petulantly, glowering like a child. "Because that is not the way it is done," Mother Kashur said curtly. Irritated, she cuffed the boy. Durotan was young and fit, The lengthy hike to the sacred mountain of the ancestors was nothing to him. She, on the other hand, would have deeply appreciated being able to ride atop her great black wolf Dreamwalker. But the traditions were ancient and specific, and as long as she was able to walk she would. Durotan bowed his head in acknowledgement. They continued on. Despite the fact that each trip exhausted her more than the previous one, Mother Kashur felt a sense of excitement that helped temper the pain and weariness. She had taken many a youngling, both male and female, for each was as valued as the other, on this final part of the rite of adulthood. But never before had she been asked to bring one before the ancestors. She was not too old to be curious. It was less than a few hours for the young, about a day for the older bones to make the trip. Evening was coming, and they were almost there. Mother Kashur looked up at the familiar shape of the mountain and smiled. Unlike other mountain ranges, whose angles seemed to be random, Ashugan's spire was a perfect triangle. Gleaming like a crystal, its facets catching the sun, it resembled the surrounding terrain not at all. It had come from the heavens long ago, and the spirits had been drawn to it. It was for this reason the orcs had settled here, in its sacred shadow. Whatever squabbles and petty differences they had as living beings, they were as one here, inside this mountain. She would go there again soon, she knew, but not as a hobbling elderly woman. This was her last visit in such a broken vessel. The next time Kashur approached Ashugan, she would come as a spirit, floating in the air as the birds did, her heart light and clean and made new. "What's wrong, Mother?" Durotan asked, concern in his young voice. She blinked, coming out of a reverie, and smiled at him. Not a thing, she assured him truthfully. The shadows had chased away the sunlight by the time they reached the foot of the mountain. They would sleep here tonight and begin their ascent at dawn. Durotan fell asleep first, wrapped in the hide of the Talbot dog he himself had slain not too long ago, and Mother Kashur watched him fondly as he slept in the deep sleep of the innocent. She herself would have no dreams. Her mind needed to be clear if she was to be ready to receive visions on the morrow. The climb was a long, tiring one, harder by far than the simple hike to reach the mountain, and Kashur was grateful both for her sturdy staff and Durotan's strong hand. But today, Kashur's feet seemed to move more surely, her lungs worked more efficiently as she and her young charge climbed. She felt as if the ancestors were pulling her forward, aiding her physical body with the power of their spirit ones. They paused at the entrance of the sacred cave. It was a perfect oval in the smooth surface of the mountain, and as always, Kashur felt as though she were entering the womb of the earth. Durotan tried to look brave, but succeeded in only looking slightly nervous. Mother Kashur did not smile at him. He should be nervous. He was about to enter sacred space at the specific request of one of his long-dead ancestors. Even she was not unmoved. She lit a bundle of dried grasses that gave off a sweet, pungent scent, and waved the smoke over him to purify him. Then she marked him with the blood of his own father had shed for this moment, kept carefully in a small stoppered leather bag. Kashur placed her withered hand upon his smooth low brow, murmured her blessing, and then nodded. "You well know that few are called before the ancestors, who do not walk the path of the shaman," she said gravely. Brown eyes wide, Durotan nodded. "I do not know what will happen, maybe nothing, but if something occurs, you know to behave with honor and respect to the beloved dead." Durotan swallowed and nodded again. Then he took a deep breath and stood straight and tall, and in the yet unmolded body of the boy, Kashur saw a hint of the clan chieftain to come. Together, they went inside, Mother Kashur going first to light the torches that lined the walls. The orange illuminations showed them the downward twining path, worn smooth by years of bare or booted orc feet. Here and there, steps had been carved to make those pilgrims' feet more secure. It was always cool inside this tunnel, warmer than it was outside in winter. Kashur let her hand brush the sides of the wall, remembering the first time she had come here long ago, the blood of her mother wet on her face, her eyes wide, her heart racing. Finally, the long, gentle downward slope ceased. There were no more torches on the wall to light, and Durotan looked at her puzzled. "We will not need to bring fire to come before the ancestors," Kashur said. They continued on a level surface, traveling into darkness. Durotan was not frightened, but he did look confused as they left the comfort of fire behind. Now it was completely dark. Kashur reached out a hand and grasped Durotan's to guide him. His strong, stubby fingers folded gently around hers. Even now, when he might be expected to clutch my hand, he remembers how it aches, she thought. The next Frostwolf chieftain would have a considerate heart. They continued without speaking, and then, subtly, like the arrival of dawn after a long, dark night, light began to grow around them. Now Kashur could dimly see the shape of the youth who stood beside her, so much younger than she, and yet already walking in a body of a grown male. She watched him as they moved forward. The miracle of the cave of the ancestors was familiar to her, but Durotan's reaction was not. His eyes widened and he inhaled swiftly as he looked around. The glow emanated from a pool in the center of the cavern, casting a soft white light over everything. All was smooth and soft and dimly radiant. There were no sharp angles or rough places, and Kashur felt the familiar sensation of deep peace wash over her. She let Durotan look his fill in silence. The cavern was huge, larger than the main drumming and dancing area at the Kashur festival, and branching tunnels led to places that Kashur had never dared to explore. It would have to be so large, would it not, to be able to host the spirit of every orc who had lived and died? She walked to the water, and he followed her, watching her closely. She removed the pack she carried, and gestured that he do likewise. Carefully, Kashur removed several water skins, opened them, and with a soft prayer, added their water to the glowing liquid. "You asked about the water skins as we departed," she said quietly to Durotan. "The water in here is not native to this place. Long ago, we began offering blessed water to the spirits. Every time we come, we contribute to the sacred pool. And even so, I know not how, the water does not dissipate as it would in an ordinary hollow. Such is the power of the mountain of spirits." Once she had emptied the water skins, she sat down with a soft grunt and peered into the luminous depths. Durotan emulated her. She knew the angle at which she could see her reflection and made sure that both were positioned correctly. At first, all she could see was her own face and that of Durotan. Their features looked spectral themselves, reflected in a white pool rather than a dark one. Then a third figure joined them, as if Grandfather Talkra was standing right beside her shoulder, his reflection as clear as theirs. Their eyes met, and Kashur smiled. She craned her neck to look up at him, but Durotan continued to gaze into the water, as if searching for the answers there. Kashur's heart sank a little, but immediately she reprimanded herself. If Durotan was not of the shamanic path, then he was not of the shamanic path. Surely his destiny would be an honorable one regardless, born to lead his clan as he had been. "My many times, great-granddaughter," Talkra said with more gentleness than Kashur had ever heard from him before. "You have brought him, as I asked." Leaning heavily on a staff as insubstantial as he, the spirit of grandfather moved in a slow circle around Durotan as the young orc continued to look into the water. Kashur watched both Frostwolf males closely. Durotan shivered and looked about, no doubt wondering where the sudden chill came from. Kashur smiled to herself. He could not see his ancestor's spirit, but he knew, somehow, that Talkra was there. "You cannot see him," she said a bit sadly. Durotan's head came up, and his nostrils flared. Swiftly, he got to his feet. In the eerie light, his tusks looked blue, and his skin had a green cast to it. "No, mother, I cannot. But, is an ancestor present?" "Indeed he is," Kashur said. She turned her attention to the ghost. "I did bring him here, as you requested. How do you find him?" Durotan swallowed hard, but remained standing straight and tall as the spirit circled him thoughtfully. "I sensed something," Talkra said. "I had thought he would be a shaman, but if he cannot see me now, then he never will. But although he will not see spirits or summon the elements, he is born to a great destiny. He will be an important asset to the Frostwolf clan, indeed, to all his people." "He will be a hero?" Kashur asked, her breath catching. All orcs strove to uphold a code of courage and honor, but only a few were powerful enough to have their names engraved upon the memory of their descendants. At her words, Durotan inhaled swiftly, and she could see the wanting on his face. "I cannot tell," said Talkra, frowning a little. "Teach him well, Kashur, for one thing is certain. From his line will come salvation." In a gesture of tenderness, the likes of which Kashur had never seen, Talcraw reached out and brushed an insubstantial finger across Durotan's cheek. Durotan's eyes went wide, and Kashur could see he had to fight the natural instinct to draw back, but Durotan did not quail beneath the spectral caress. Then, like mist on a hot day, Talcraw was gone. Kashur stumbled a little. She always forgot how the energy of the spirits fed her. Durotan stepped forward quickly to catch her arm, and she was grateful for his youthful strength. "Mother, are you all right?" he asked. She gripped his arm and nodded. His first concern was for her, not for what the ancestor might or might not have said about him. Even as she pondered the words, she decided not to tell Durotan of them. Level-headed and great-hearted though he was, such a prophecy could corrupt even the truest of Orcish hearts. From his line will come salvation. "I am all right," she reassured him, "but these bones are no longer young, and the energy of the spirits is powerful." "I wish I could have seen him," Durotan said a bit wistfully. But I know I felt him." "You did, and that is more than most are honored with," Kashur said. "Mother, can you tell me what he said about me being a hero?" He was trying to act calm and mature, but a note of pleading crept in. She did not blame him. All wanted to live on in glorious memory through tales told of their adventures. He would not be an orc if he did not share that desire. "Grandfather Talcraw said it was uncertain," she said bluntly. He nodded and hid his disappointment well. That much was all she had planned to say, but something moved her to add. "You have a destiny to fulfill, Durotan, son of Garad. Be not a fool in battle and die before you can fulfill it." He chuckled then. "A fool does not serve his clan well, and that is what I wish to do." "Then, future chieftain," said Kashur, chuckling also, "you had best be about finding a mate." And she laughed out loud as, for the first time on their journey together, Durotan looked completely unnerved. Chapter 5. Upon reflection, so Drekthar tells me, this time in our history was as a perfect day in early summer. We orcs had everything we truly needed. A hospitable world, the ancestors to guide us, the elements to aid us as they saw fit. Food was plentiful. Our enemies were fierce but not invincible, and we were rich with blessings. If the Draenei were not necessarily our allies, neither were they foe. They shared their knowledge and their bounty whenever they were asked. It was we, the orcs, who always held back, and it is we, the orcs, who would unwittingly be twisted to serve another's end. Hate is powerful. Hate can be internal. Hate can be manipulated, and hate can be created. In the darkness visible, ageless, timeless, Kil'jaeden dwelt. The power surged and throbbed through him, better than blood now, more nourishing than meat or drink, heating and calming at the same time. He was not omnipotent, not yet, or else worlds would fall before him with a thought rather than through battle and destruction, and on the whole, he was content with this. But they yet lived, die exiles. Kil'jaeden could sense them, though centuries had passed according to those whom time still mattered. They were lying low, Velen and die rest of the fools, too cowardly to face him and Archimonde, who had worked as his friend and ally through the changes, as he had when they were simple beings. He, Archimonde, and the others no longer thought of themselves as Eredar. Velen would call them Manari, but they called themselves the Burning Legion, Sargeras' army, the Chosen Ones. He extended a scarlet hand, long and elegant and clawed, into the nothingness that was everything, and felt it ripple beneath his inquiry. Scouts had been dispatched the moment the enemy had escaped, scouts who reported nothing but failure. Archimonde wanted them to die for their lack of success, but Kil'jaeden opted otherwise. Those who feared, fled. He had good cause to know. Those who sniffed reward and their lord's approval stayed, hungering for it. So while Kil'jaeden made his disapproval known, those who had failed him usually got a second chance, or third if he believed them to be doing all they could and not simply coasting on his goodwill. Archimonde disagreed on this obsession that occupied Kil'jaeden. There are worlds aplenty to conquer and devour, in service to our master Sargeras, Archimonde rumbled. The blackness glowed around them as his voice pierced it. Let the fool go. We would sense it if he used his talents on any level that would pose a threat. Let him rot in some world, bereft of everything that mattered to him. Kil'jaeden slowly turned his massive head to regard the other demon lord. It is not about rendering him powerless, Kil'jaeden hissed. It is about destroying him and those foolish enough to have followed him. It is about crushing him for his lack of faith, for his stubbornness, for his refusal to think about what was best for all of us. The large, clawed hand turned into a fist, and the sharp nails dug into the palm. Molten fire poured forth, then the flow stopped as it hit what passed for air, leaving a thick ridge like a scar. Kil'jaeden's body was covered with many such welts. He took pride in them. Archimonde was powerful, elegant, smooth, intelligent, but he lacked the burning desire for utter obliteration that Kil'jaeden nursed. He had explained it time and again, and now simply sighed and opted not to discuss the matter further. For centuries now, they had had this argument. No doubt, they would continue to have it for centuries more, or until Kil'jaeden succeeded in the destruction of the being who had once been his closest friend. Archimonde had never had particular feelings for Velen, other than as a fellow leader of the Eredar. Kil'jaeden had loved Velen as a brother, closer than that, loved him almost as another aspect of himself, and then, again the huge hand clenched, and again unholy fire poured forth in lieu of blood. No, it would not be enough to think of Velen sitting on some backwater world, nursing his hurt pride, living off the land in some cave. Kil'jaeden once would have said he wanted blood, but blood, powerful in its own ways as it was, would not satisfy him now. He wanted the essence of shame, of utter and complete humiliation. That would be even sweeter than the coppery taste of life flowing from Velen and his stupid followers. Archimonde tilted his head, a gesture Kil'jaeden recognized. One of his own servants was speaking to him. Archimonde had his own schemes and machinations, all, like Kil'jaeden's, in service to their dark master and his ultimate conquest. Without a word, Archimonde rose to his full imposing height and departed, his movements lithe and sleek, belying his size. At that moment as well, Kil'jaeden felt a slight scratching inside his head. He recognized it at once. It was Talgoth, ever his right hand, seeking contact, and the sensation emanating from the thought was one of a cautious hope. "What is it, my friend? Speak," Kil'jaeden commanded in his mind. "My great lord, I do not wish to plant false hope, but I may have found them." Tempered delight rose inside Kil'jaeden. Like the being he haunted, Talgoth was ever the cautious one of his minions. Only a little lower in rank than Kil'jaeden himself, he had proven his loyalty over the centuries. He would not say even this guarded statement without good cause. Where, and what makes you sense this? There is a small world, primitive and insignificant, and I have sensed there a peculiar brand of magic minting the area. It is possible that they may have come and gone. Such, alas, has happened before. Kil'jaeden nodded, even though Talgoth was not present to see the gesture. Some things from his past yet lingered, he thought, smiling a little at the ancient movement that betokened agreement in nearly every sentinel species he had encountered. "You speak truly," he acknowledged. Many times before, Kil'jaeden's forces had arrived in some world or other, lured by the sweet essence of Eredar magic, only to find that somehow Velen and his wretched followers had gotten wind of the approach and escaped. But I remain hopeful. I will find them and twist them to my purposes, and I have eternity in which to do so. A thought occurred to him. So often before, Kil'jaeden's forces had descended upon a world where Velen was thought to be, only to have him escape. Kil'jaeden had nourished his insulted pride by destroying such worlds, but the slaughter of primitive races, though pleasant, did not slake his demonic thirst for complete and total revenge. He would not behave that way this time. He would not send Talgoth at the head of the Burning Legion. Velen had once been the strongest of them, the wisest, the most attuned to magic and science. Kil'jaeden could not imagine that his old friend would have dropped his guard, not after such a relatively brief time. Velen would be constantly on the alert, ready to flee in the face of so obvious of a threat. But what about a less obvious threat? "Talgoth, I want you to investigate this world for me, my lord." Talgoth's mental voice was smooth and poised, but puzzled. "We have descended upon worlds in force before, and to no avail. Perhaps this time only one is sent. One only, but one who can be trusted completely." Kil'jaeden sensed unease and pride warring in Talgoth's thoughts. There are many ways to destroy one's enemy than with an army. Sometimes those ways are better. You You wish me to find such a better way, then? Precisely. Visit this place on your own. Learn about it. Investigate. Tell me if the exiles are truly there, and if so, what their state is. Tell me what they live on, if they are fat and settled like tamed livestock, or lean and edgy, like prey animals. Tell me what their world is like, what other peoples live there, what creatures, what seasons. Investigate, Talgoth. Do nothing without express orders from me. Of course, my lord. I shall prepare at once. Still puzzled, but obedient and intelligent, Talgoth had served the Minari master well in the past. Now he would serve well again. Kil'jaeden's face, though it little resembled what it had been before he had cast his lot with the great Lord Sargeras, was still able to twist into the facsimile of a smile. Durotan, like all his people, had been ready to begin training with weapons at the age of 6. His body was already tall and filling out, and the usage of weaponry came naturally to his people. At 12, he had gone with the hunting parties, and now, after the rite that marked him as an adult, he had been able to join them in the hunt for ogres and their obscene, twisted masters, the Gron. This year, as the autumn Kashur came, he joined the adults in the circle after the children had been sent to bed, and as he and Ogrim had learned years before, being an adult and being able to attend the fireside circle was not very interesting. However, the one thing he did find interesting, as he watched with observant brown eyes, was interacting with those whose names he had known for many years, but who never spoke much to him because of his youth. Mother Kashur, of course, was from his own Dan. He knew she had high standings among the shaman of the other clans, and he took pride in that fact. He noticed her huddled by the fire on his first night, a woven blanket wrapped around a frame that seemed to him little more than bone and skin. He knew, without knowing how he knew, that this would be her last Kashur celebration, and the thought saddened him more than he had expected. Next to her, younger than she but older than Durotan's parents, was Kashur's apprentice, Drekthar. Durotan had not spoken much with Drekthar, but the older orc's sharp tongue and sharp eyes were deserving of much respect. Durotan's brown eyes continued to roam over the assembled company. Tomorrow, the shaman would be gone, departing for their meetings with the ancestors in the cavern of the sacred mountain. Durotan shivered as he recalled their visit there, and the cold breeze that he felt like a draft, but was nothing so ordinary. Over there was Grom Hellscream, the young and slightly manic chieftain of the Warsong clan, only a few years older than Durotan and Ogrim. He was new to his position. There had been mutterings about the mysterious circumstances under which the former chieftain had died, but the Warsong clan did not challenge Grom's leadership. Durotan thought it no wonder. Though youthful, Grom was intimidating. The dancing, flickering light of the fire only served to make him look more menacing. Thick black hair flowed down his back. Upon his ascension to chieftainship, Grom's jaw had been tattooed a uniform shade of black. Around his neck hung a necklace of bones. Durotan knew their meaning. Among the Warsong, it was tradition that a young warrior wear the bones of his first kill, inscribed with his personal runes. Beside Grom was the enormous, imposing Black Hand of the Blackrock clan. Next to Black Hand, munching in silence, was the chieftain of the Shattered Hand clan, Kargath Bladefist. In lieu of a hand, he had a scythe embedded in his wrist, and even now, as an adult, Durotan found himself unsettled as the blade glinted in the firelight. Next to him was Kil'jaeden Deadeye, chieftain of the Bleeding Hollow clan. The name was not a familiar one, but one he had taken for himself. One eye flitted over the assembled company, the other sat, mangled and dead in truth, in its socket. If Grom was young for a chieftain, then Kil'jaeden was old for one. But it was clear to Durotan that despite his years and grizzled appearance, Kil'jaeden was far from done with either life or leadership. Uneasily, Durotan turned his attention elsewhere. On Drekthar's left was the famous Ner'zhul of the Shadowmoon clan. For as long as Durotan could remember, Ner'zhul had led the shaman. Once, Durotan had been permitted to attend a hunt at which Ner'zhul had been present, and the mastery this shaman had over his skills was shocking. While others grunted and labored to contact the elements, directing them powerfully but without grace, Ner'zhul remained tranquil. The earth shook beneath him when he asked it. Lightning came down from the skies to strike where he directed. Fire, air, water, earth, and the elusive spirits of the wilds all called him companion and friend. He had not seen Ner'zhul interact with the ancestors, of course. No one but shaman were witness to such things. But it was clear to Durotan that if the ancestors had not favored Ner'zhul, he would not have serenely carried power all this time. Ner'zhul's apprentice, however, Durotan did not like.